Virginia gets to have its first female governor. Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic candidate, was endorsed by former President Barack Obama. Trump had endorsed Winsome Earl Sears, a Republican, to keep the state Republican. A reminder that in 2024, Kamala Harris had won the state by only a modest margin during the presidential election. Let's take a listen, though, to the former Congresswoman and CIA officer who spoke to her supporters celebrating at her election rally.
We sent a message to every corner of the Commonwealth, a message to our neighbors and our fellow Americans across the country. We sent a message to the whole world that in 2025, Virginia chose pragmatism over partisanship. I have worked with anyone and everyone, regardless of political party, to deliver results for the people that I serve. And that's because I believe in this idea that there is so much more that unites us as Virginians and as Americans than divides us.
Also, Mikey Sherrill, a Navy veteran, won the election for governor in New Jersey, making it stay Democrat for 3 consecutive terms, now leaving very little room to Donald Trump's candidate. Let's head to Washington to our correspondent, Fraser Jackson. Fraser, it's been a good night for the Democrats. Tell us what the result, first in Virginia and in New Jersey, what this means to Donald Trump's administration 1 year on.
Yeah, I think this really has some parallels to be drawn between them. First, in Virginia, not far from where I am right now, Democrat Abigail Spanberger, the former CIA officer turned congresswoman, becoming the 75th governor of Virginia, the first woman ever to hold that position. The race was called with barely 29% of the votes counted, meaning that seat flipped from a Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's been a very close ally of Donald Trump. It was his deputy, Winsome Earl Sears, that she was running against, but this really is being seen as a litmus test on Donald Trump's presidency. Virginia, in particular, has felt the impacts of President Trump's policies. Many federal workers cross the Potomac River every day to go to work in Washington, D.C., and many of them have been unceremoniously fired when Trump took office. Many more being furloughed under the government shutdown, which is now the longest in U.S. history. Well, the Republican that she was running against, Winsome Earl Sears, who, as I said, is the sitting lieutenant governor, ran on a very similar platform to Donald Trump, using many of those culture war issues in her campaign ads, but she lagged in the polls, and Donald Trump seemed to sense that she would lose the race. He never actually endorsed her officially, and he somewhat distanced himself from her in recent days. I think the key thing to note here is that across the board, Spanberger outperformed Kamala Harris in last year's election, with Winsome Earl Sears underperforming Donald Trump. And that is the same story that we saw in New Jersey, where Democrat Mikey Sherrill beat Republican Jack Ciattarelli. The state hadn't elected a governor of the same party 3 times in a row since 1961. Well, the Democrats there were looking to make the election a referendum on Trump and his administration by tying Ciattarelli to the president, while Republicans looked to make the election a referendum on continued Democratic governance in the state. Ultimately, it appears that the Democratic messaging won out there in New Jersey.
Fraser, very briefly, how will Democrats be feeling about this result in general? What is the trend now seeing more broadly, as you've just been mentioning actually this evening?
I think the move away from Republicans across the board towards the Democrats will definitely be giving them some solace this evening. We've already heard from Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, who said this was a repudiation of the Trump administration, saying it was a good night for Democrats and our fight to lower costs, improve health care and build a better future for American families. But the fact remains that the party does feel currently rudderless, and it is now really torn between the old guard and the new generation, represented by somebody like Zohran Mamdani, who just, of course, became the new mayor of New York. So there is a turning point here, really, for the Democratic Party, and the National Party will have to look more locally and across the state to see which way it goes, towards the more democratic socialist side or the more established side that is represented by people like Chuck Schumer.